have this issue of phubbing, which is basically turning away from people when you're on your phone. So just getting into this whole thing of, well, what's going on my phone? And that way we're ignoring or avoiding that interpersonal connection, that opportunity to really connect, to give eye contact, to take the time to put the phone down. And
in the loudest untrue wisdom was just hunger dressed as truth. A million eyes that never knew them, still defining all their youth. Are we the lost generation, raised by signals in the dark? Technology played our errand with no soul and no real heart. Now we're reaching through reflections, trying to become somebody free.
Hey viewers, we're picking up the episode where we left off in the last episode, and hope you enjoyed the continuation of this. So here we go. So again, then the last piece on the slide is talking about the algorithmic tracking, that there's so many kids who just, again, they don't trust and a lot of things around them, and every move is being tracked. Imagine, again, growing up and feeling like everything you do, somebody somewhere, somehow, if they're not watching, they can just log into your account or check your phone and track where you've been for the last year, even without even a lot of people realizing. But now our kids just part of their reality, I think, in many ways. So that would feel very off-putting. So the real thing that we're addressing here behind all this is the empathy and soft skills gap. And we're looking at the idea that this to me, this information revolution, as I would say, really it demands emotional intelligence. But I would say, to me, that's why I talk about emotional specificity, really understanding the purpose of each emotion, not just that emotions are there, but understanding what each emotion is there to teach us, tell us, show us. And when we do that, we can start to understand our interpersonal skills much better. And that's where this digital age has really eroded that, because in order to learn interpersonal skills, we have to relate to people live, not just on phone calls, like or not just on text, and not just on chats. We really want to get face to face. And in this world, in today's world, we have to look at it. It's going to be balance. It's finding balance in all this stuff, and how do we get to that place of balance with that. So we want to look at balancing or finding the pieces and increasing face-to-face communication in all these puzzle pieces, and our resilience. How do we bounce back from situations that so many young adults they've lost the resilience because of all that low level of anxiety, and then empathy and feeling for others. That's why that discussion of Sonder to me was so important, is really, it helps to increase that sense of understanding and empathy for us to really see other people's path and understanding. We have this issue of phubbing, which is basically turning away from people when you're on your phone. So just getting into this whole thing of, well, what's going on my phone? And that way we're ignoring or avoiding that interpersonal connection, that opportunity to really connect, to give eye contact, to take the time to put the phone down. And I've been guilty of that, at home.
Me too.
I acknowledge that. Yeah. So how have we done that? How have we modeled that? And then the presentation panic. So many of our kids that they had skills, and then they get in these situations where they feel that fear of feeling judged, and the microscope's on them with all these kids looking at them in their presentation, and the panic takes over. Because again, it's the lack of interpersonal skills that then drive this stuff, that we have to look at that level of how do we help them embrace the feelings of helplessness, to see that they need some help. Yet, like I said, when kids don't want to look weak or bad or wrong, especially in their teenage and young adult years, they don't want to acknowledge those deeper things. So they just react rather than learn how to be more proactive. And then as we look at isolation, people, even though they have leadership abilities, they still often want to work individually rather than collaborating, and that feeds their deeper isolation. So I think there are a lot of us as adults who sometimes we learn in school projects that we were assigned to other people, and usually there's one or two people, or maybe one who does most of the work. That's been a lot of our stories throughout time, and I think throughout our lives in ways. And in that, um, our kids, this generation, young adults have experienced it that much more. And also because it's so easy just to go and do it themselves or pull away and not worry about that human interaction. I think that's another piece that we want to look and acknowledge here. So as we're looking at this graph here, this table here, we have this generational continuum between Gen Z and Gen Alpha. We have the tech relationship. Well, Gen Z were digital adapters, so they adapted to the digital changes, whereas Gen Alpha, as we said, is just AI and streaming natives. They've been immersed in this from the beginning. It's part of their almost their DNA. When we look at the idea of epigenetics, which is the ability to modify genetics from one generation to the other based on environmental influences, I'm really interested in seeing what happens epigenetically from this generation who then has kids in 10, 20 years and what those kids look like, and what they're like. So then we're looking at primary crisis. Well, we had the smartphone adoption of Gen Z and the post-COVID perma crisis of Gen Alpha. So we're looking at these things that prime them to kind of respond the way they respond. Their educational hurdle was delayed maturation and slow life strategy of Gen Z. So they were behind the curve of not wanting to drive, not wanting to necessarily get jobs, not being comfortable stepping into maybe more full leadership positions, as we touched on there. And then in Gen Alpha, we had collapsing attention spans and these educational scores dropping. So that collapsing attention spans, as I said, was reinforced by all of our short content that we put out there, that most kids have an attention span of just a few minutes. So imagine being a teacher these days and trying to teach to that,
That's tricky. And, one little tidbit I will give for parents is when my daughter went into college, everyone, grades. You have to have the best GPA. You have to do that. What really got her scholarship was her ability to speak, communicate, look people in the eyes. And she's off to the races in college because she really has a skill set that not a lot of people possess in that generation, in Gen Z. So just a little, tidbit that I'm going to put out there. Yes, grades are important, 100%. SAT scores, 100%. But it was her leadership because it really put her in a pack that Gen Z and Gen Alpha apparently don't have a lot of that communicative ability within that generation. So it's a nice niche area. If your child possesses those skills, really hone them and foster them and craft them so that they can have that be potentially, what helps them get into college, gets them the scholarships, gets them the jobs, because there's just not a lot of that in that particular generation.
Well, and to your credit, you did a really good job of, they saw you engaging with people. They've seen you be very, you're very outgoing and a really effective communicator. They saw a lot of that. And you also then encouraged them through the activities you got them involved with to get out there and put them in those situations, to work through that uncomfortability and grow their level of confidence and comfort within themselves through some of their, again, those opportunities. And even I'm sure they had their own struggles and they're resilient kids,
Yeah, and of course, life happened to them too, right? Life's going to happen to everybody. For them, it happened a little earlier, and I appreciate all of that. But yes, it is putting your kids out in those scenarios where, as small as you order your own food. I don't like, once they were able to speak and effectively communicate, that was one of our first things that we did. It was like when we were sitting out at a restaurant, eyes. We used to say that all the time. The kids still tease eyes, because I would always say that. And then that meant look at the person you're speaking to, and then you order, please. What would you like to have? And, not always were they super happy about doing that. But eventually it just became second nature, because it gave them the responsibility that if you would like to eat and order your food, then that's how you do it. You need to speak.
Yeah.
Effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah. And your kids do, so again, kudos to you on that and the way you've approached so much of these things. Yeah. So So what we want to look at is what are kids craving? Talking about food, right? Nice segue. So, kids are craving in Gen Z safe spaces and tolerance from others. So that's where we want to look at our intolerance of our kids who might feel like they're struggling. It's not that they just want to be lazy. It's that we need to help create the environment, the safe space, and some tolerance for them to trip and fall and build more resilience. And then we also want to look at authenticity and of the Gen Alpha wanting authenticity or honesty, truthfulness to build trust and feel empowered in themselves, and feel like people acknowledge them and see them, and it's not just a competition for eyes. It's that people really, to me, honestly see them and acknowledge who they are and love them for who they are, and then that helps to grow in that sense of more confidence. So what we want to see is some of these contradictions. So they're not, these kids aren't passive victims, young adults aren't passive victims. They're proactively rewriting these schools of childhood. So they lean heavily in technology, yet deeply appreciate the value of in-person community is one of the things it says here. The other side of that is they crave escapist storytelling, yet they possess a profound awareness of the global crises we face. So you have these two pieces coming together, and in that overlap on this is that they're rejecting the spoon-fed algorithmic feeds in favor of becoming empowered fans, asserting agency to find niche content on their own terms. Again, but then we're looking at the qualitative terms of the content that they're finding. What are the qualitative aspects and what are they seeking and why? And starting to, again, rather than judge, look to understand, look and see what your kids are watching, and even share some things that you're watching that back with them so that they can see what you're watching, you can see what they're watching. But in this, we have to see that we all have a piece in this. And as long as we play the victim, remember, it's not our fault. I'm the victim. This happened to me. And therefore, I'm not going to own my own actions in that if I can see that. So we want to see where it's important for them to see their responsibility, not their fault, not blame, not use guilt as the weapon, but see their responsibility and how they got here and how things can continue to change. And even though seeing that, it is in many ways, it's going to be like getting an addict to stop using their drug, because this technology is the drug of choice these days for so many of us.
Absolutely. But here's the irony of this generation, specifically Gen Alpha. They're probably the most empathetic human beings walking the planet, because they have, in my experience, they really have a level of compassion and empathy, not just for each other, but also for the environment. Like we don't talk about using AI in my house because my youngest is like, you're going to kill the planet. She has very strong feelings about that. And it's like, okay, well, it's here. So now what do you propose we do? Because people are using it. My job is literally saying, hey, we developed this new tool. We need you to use it for AI. So sure enough, she was like, okay, I found an eco AI. And I was like, okay, I can use that. Like, I'll use that then, so.
Yeah. And I agree. And that to me is where the promise lies, is that to me, if you look at that, generations come for a reason, and this generation is here to awaken us to the canaries in the coal mine, and they're letting us see the problems. And hopefully they don't, again, I think we talked about this on a previous episode about that song, Land of Confusion from Genesis, and that they were going to change the future, and that their generation, they were going to change the future, and we see where that went. Well, we want to make sure that this generation, we give them the agency, the power, and let them continue to find the way to a better future, and really look to what they want for themselves and their kids and their kids' kids. And that's the thing, I think, again, that idea of Sonder, I keep coming back to it, but I think it applies in so many situations for us to understand the circumstance of everybody, rather than only look, really at ourselves and see the rest of the world in a 2D model. So now we're getting to some of the solutions, some of the skill building areas. So we're looking at strategy 1, rebuilding the coping muscle. Gen Alpha easily diagnoses themselves with clinical mental health terms, but lacks the friction tested skills to overcome setbacks. So like I said, if you become the victim to your diagnosis, and you think that and feel and believe you're broken and can't work through that, I think you want to look at that sense of, okay, where has that learned helplessness come from? And how do I continue to build more resilience? And that starts with the parents of not being the snowplow, not clearing every obstacle out of your kids' ways. Failure is one of the greatest emotions out there because it says there's more to learn. And then failure's brother stupid said that there's multiple feelings of failure to learn from, multiple things to grow from. And then guilt is always going to come with failure, potentially stupid, because the guilt says, "Up, I've done something to somebody else. I need to fix. I need to fix." And almost more importantly, if not more importantly, a shame says, "Remember, I've done something to myself. I need to fix." And that's really not loving me and not honoring myself and not giving life my best. I often ask people, "Are you living to die or dying to live?" And people often go, "What?" And I go, "Think about it for a sec." And there are a lot of people out there to me these days who are just living to die. And I want to
Oh
help
yeah, I
people
think
to
a
be dying
lot.
to live.
You're on the hamster wheel for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and or they're, they're just waiting for if a truck came along, there are a lot of people in that space, and that's where you got to look at that idea of learned helplessness and how that's even a pandemic these days. So one of the other pieces is, other than pushing all the obstacles out of your kids' way, is then let them struggle in offline world. Let them struggle in looking at relationships. Let them figure out how to learn to cope and what are their coping mechanisms. What are the things that they can do? So give them freedom to explore, face their challenges, critically fail. That's what we just talked about. And learning how to cope is actually having real world things to cope with. So that means interacting with those struggles and letting them work them through. Be there to help them up if they fall, and sometimes even to be there to stand beside them while they get up on their own 2 feet.
Absolutely. And that's so hard as a parent because you never want to watch your kid fall or fail or feel like a failure. But obviously this is all age dependent. But another tip is, when my kids got to a certain age, you're emailing the teacher. That's not my responsibility. You email the teacher. And my oldest daughter, who's in college, still says to me literally last week, "Thank you so much for teaching me how to write an email." And I was like, "Your friends don't know how to write an email?" And she's like, "Most of them do not." So it sounds ridiculous, but we take for granted a lot of things that we know how to do. But in this digital age, a lot of those life skills are lost. So
Right.
it is hard to watch your kids struggle. And I always call it the helicopter parent, that
Yep.
like comes down. So, but snowplow, same thing. But it really is, if you look at it as, I'm blessing my child by giving them this failure, what did we learn from it? It really is a better vantage point, but it's hard. It's so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Strategy 2 here, curating the inputs. This is kind of, we already talked about already, is setting screen limits is enough, but focus on media literacy and put boundaries. Again, that's discernment, that's vetting, that's finding multiple sources, that's asking yourself, like you said, what is this person trying to sell? Are they trying to sell the truth, or are they trying to sell their own lie and their own side? So establish a new anchor, teach them explicitly how to determine if a source is credible. Again, talked about, rather than relying on the first popular video they watch as factual truth. Like we were talking recently about AI, and one of the stories getting out there is that AI is causing cancer and using up all the water. And I was like, okay, what are your sources? And then kind of talked about that, and I talked about confirmation bias with that it's really the increased use of electricity and other factors that really, the cancer was just that was a permacrisis item, that was just a clickbait kind of thing. The
Yeah.
water thing, there's some validity, but to me, that's where I said, how do you think AI is going to solve those problems? How can AI help to solve those
Ask
problems?
AI. That's what I told Ariel to do. Ask AI, how do we make you better for the environment? And it
Uh-huh.
tell you.
Yeah. Even how do we really find meaningful solutions to our disagreements and to war? That's some of the things. That's why, again, I'm doing what I'm doing and developing one of the I haven't talked about it all on the show, but one of the things I'm developing is the goal is to work with AI to help not just people to figure out how to respond different things, but to also give some education to AI on that because garbage in, garbage out. And there's a lot of garbage that's going in that's
For
feeding
sure.
garbage back out. And that's, that might sound judgmental. I think we know the quality of what's gone in to feed some of the AIs and with purposely intentional to some degree to feed biases and to feed
Yeah,
personal opinions rather
absolutely.
than seek truth. So that's where again we want to have those processing breaks is the next piece. So make sure you're taking those breaks so that you're not constantly feeding the brain. You're not constantly having your brain seeking high speed information, short bites. You want to interact with the world. Do things whether it's even playing solitaire, or playing a card game, or going out and shooting baskets, working in the garden, things that just really take more interactive time with the world. They aren't short, and they involve your engaged attention, not just shifted quick attention. So how do we foster offline collaboration? So we combat individual bias. Alpha defaults to working alone. We must intentionally design environments that force face-to-face teamwork and social emotional learning. The more you're interacting in groups, the more you're going to learn to work things out. The issue is you need more than just one person who wants to work it out. And that's what I see. I see, at times I talk about Grace a lot, but also about other people in other situations where I'm trying to encourage this with everybody I work with. Get out there and work with other people. And if there are three people in the group and two out of the three are not really interested in working on that, you're still stuck.
Right.
And that's the struggle.
And we've
So,
all been on that group project.
yeah. Yeah, and yeah. So I think we want to see that we want to make sure that even those who are setting those situations up are guiding those on how to really work on that social interaction and connecting, and not just leaving it to one person who feels like they're failing again, failing again, failing again. Because if you're trying to interact with people and they don't seem to want to interact with you, what do you feel like you learn from failure is not to interact with people, you
Yeah.
know? And that's a really sad output, outcome. So the next piece, rethink the delivery. Old strategies don't work. Education and management must pivot to hands-on student-centered learning, project simulations, and real-world applications. So yes, schools are moving to AI learning, while I think you have to balance that with then giving them projects to interact, create those science projects, or again, do those hands-on exercises that are going to engage manual dexterity and learning that way. We have to look at the idea of visual learning, auditory learning, and kinesthetic learning. And so many times I'm helping parents to understand how their kids learn. And that when you have a kinesthetic learner, they might not really be able to pay much attention to this, but if this is what you feel that, well, this is the world and this is the way it's going to be, you still want to help them find balance and let them even learn about some of these things through their kinesthetic experiences, through their hands-on experiences, not just by looking for the answer online as well.
Yeah. And if you're curious to know what type of learner your child is, you can literally go online and you can Google what type of learner is my child, and
Mhm.
quizzes will pop up. And I did it for my girls when we started homeschooling way back in the
Mhm.
day. And it
Mhm.
was lovely because I'm like, oh, well, Ariel is an auditory learner, and Ariel or Skylar was, I call it tactile, kinesthetic learner.
Mhm.
And it was like, so that helped tremendously. And that can also then help identify why certain kids struggled more during COVID,
Yes.
with
Great.
based learning.
Great input. Great input. I wasn't aware of the online. I just pretty much look at kid. I can, to
You
me, it's
like, you get
ding,
it?
ding, ding,
No,
ding.
I took it myself because I was like, well, what am I? I have two, that are really there. So for me, it's like listening and doing are
Mhm.
two things that if I can combine those two, that sticks with me.
Right.
So it's really cool to know what your child is, because that will help with
Yeah.
their learning as well. It helps with their communication.
Yep. Yep. So the last piece on here, bring back accountability, reestablish standard social contracts that phubbing and digital escapism have eroded. So again, like you said, eyes, and it doesn't have to be, it's, I think tone is a lot. And I can see you just eyes, versus look at me, look at the person when you're talking to them, get your head out of your phone. I think we want to look at, if we're doing things to evoke guilt, feelings of guilt and shame, we are going to then encourage more avoidance. If we're doing things to evoke a sense of positive interaction and the rewards of that and saying, good job, thank you for doing that, I appreciate you looking up from your phone. Again, remember the struggles that they're having. And we might not understand them. And if all we want our kids is to be billboards for us and how great of parents we are, that's not going to get it done either, because they're not going to see you as authentic as a parent. So that's what we want to learn. So the next strategy here, channeling creation over consumption, pivot their tech use from passive ingestion to active digital creation. So encourage your kids to get on there and create things. Work on being part of the solution. Work on, again, it's a sense of empowerment, a sense of, as I know the big word these days is agency. So data shows 40% of young people would love to create video games. 33% want to make their own podcasts, blend digital exploration with hands-on creativity, making AI-assisted art, writing scripts, or building social gaming worlds to build agency. Like I've told you all before in the show, I work with some of the people I work with to create songs, AI songs, and we talk about it. And it's so powerful, because so many of our kids feel so powerless, they fall into that learned helplessness of hierarchical cultures, versus helping them to continue to see their own sense of empowerment, even with the internet, even with their interactions. So again, be careful to step on their dreams when they might be the ones to create the next awesome video game, the next immersive experience. So just let them follow some of that path and encourage them to do it. They'll figure out their way. It doesn't have to be on the clock. They're on their own clock. And it doesn't mean that they're going to take till they're 40, expect that it's all going to work out. On their own, you still want to give guidance and support along the way, and encouragement, direction, help them to learn how to set goals, help them to execute on goals, set manageable goals, and sub goals underneath that. So we have to look at short, intermediate, and long-term goals, and identify the difference between their hopes, dreams, goals, and expectations. And that's another important piece too. So role of the guide, here we're getting to being exemplary. Model the behavior. Adults must put down their phones to demonstrate healthy boundaries and undivided attention. Create safe channels. Provide secure, open forums for them to process their visceral fears about the state of the world without judgment. So yeah, just listen. Oh, that's silly. That's never going to happen. See how many times people have said, that's silly. That's never going to happen. And oops. So entertain their thoughts and their feelings. Be open, because if you shut that down, you're discouraging communication, and you want to foster communication, especially also with your young adults, while they're still forming their views and opinions of the world and their place in it. And then provide the canvas. Focus less on banning technology and more on creating positive environments that facilitate healthy social, emotional tech use. We're talking about, again, finding that the balance of this. In this world we live in a tech-based world. We just have to acknowledge that. So be part of that solution, and be part of them building some sense of understanding, insight, awareness along the way through this. So I wanted to end with hope. So I think, Tara, you touched on it a while ago, whereas this is a very empathic generation, and they feel a lot. There's nothing wrong with that. It's helping to guide how they feel and how they express that between themselves, within themselves, to shift that idea of hopelessness to hope, of helplessness to help. And that's where we want to help empower them and give them that sense of agency. Again, we want to see the hope that we have in this culture, this society, this generation also, to know that this is their world that they're creating now for them to live in. And we're a part of that. And yes, they're a part of our world, but understand, we want to help them turn hopelessness into a feeling of hope, and helplessness toward a feeling of help. And that means helping them to empower them, helping them to find their way. So As it says here, despite their ambient anxiety, Gen Alpha believes narrowly but firmly, or narrowly, I would say, and firmly, that the future is more exciting than it is scary. I love that idea. We might hear a lot about the fears because remember, fears look to the future. They're trying to do things to keep us from experiencing pain. While, yes, there is a framework to set here that we are part of setting that framework towards the future as well. They don't see our global crises as intractable reasons for doomerism. So again, that's where they see possibility. That's where we want to make sure our kids, we're starting to help them to see what possibility there is in this and see that the world has survived, has made it through a lot of these difficult times and challenges historically. So really help them understand the cycles of history and renewal and growth and shifts in whether it's politics or whether it's reclaiming things about the earth. We can even just go back short term to what fluorocarbons were doing to the ozone layer and how the ozone layer has found its way back. So I think that, like I said, technology, humans have adapted to change because of the challenges. And that's where I really see a lot of promise. So they view often the challenges as obstacles that can and will be overcome if their generation rises to the occasion. This is, again, why we want to encourage empowerment. And they're deeply empathetic, highly aware, and ready to meet the challenge. So let's all help them do that together. All 8 billion of us are in this world together.
And I do think a really good ending note is something that I said on the very first episode, which is my mantra about my kids: I am a safe harbor. I am a safe harbor. And if you continuously tell yourself, I am a safe place to land for my children, then you're also able to communicate effectively with them. And, you know, Eric, we were talking before we came on about communication. And I said, if your kid is communicating with you, you're doing something right. Communication to me is paramount. And that is everything, because you want to know, we didn't get into any like safety, right? We're talking all about developmental issues and how that is socially and cognitively, but you also want to talk with them so that they know that you have their best interests at heart as well, and that they're safe. So by you being that safe space for them, being able to communicate with them, hopefully they are going to be able to talk to you about any and everything that they find here, which is imperative. Yeah.
So here we leave it with, Gen Z and Gen Alpha are not broken cohorts to be managed. They are innovators. They're change makers navigating an unprecedented ecosystem. And as we bridge those soft skills gaps, we demand offline resilience and guiding them from passive consumers to active creators. We aren't just saving them. Like I said, we're helping them to save themselves. They are not victims. We are not victims. And that's what we want to recognize and remember. We're working towards equity, not hierarchy. We're working them from feeling victimized and recognizing maybe ways they feel singled out and victimized, and saying, okay, it's my choice from here what I do with that. And we're equipping them with the exact tools they need to build a better world. That's up to each of us to do. So through this whole journey, remember, it is a journey. It's not a destination. And that's what we really want to keep in mind, is that we're all in this together.
So, I love this generation, and I am so hopeful for what's to come. I think they're amazing.
Me as well. And I love being somebody who's fostering and being a part of fostering this generation to live to their fullest potential and hopefully exceed anything we could have ever dreamed or thought of. So until next time.
Hold your children, hear them clearly. Stay when silence fills the room. Love is not a notification. Love is presence breaking through. Put your hands around the hurting. Let your hearts be brave enough to choose connection over treasure, to choose each other over stuff. We're not the lost generation. We're the one that came to lead, teaching us all to find our center, teaching us what souls still need. We are here to wake our vision, call us all back to what is true, that human hearts are worth far more than all the things we chase. Let this generation change us. Let it pull us back to love. Past possessions, past performance, to the grace we've not enough of. We were never born to vanish. We were born to help us see. The truest wealth is human closeness, and love is who we're meant to be.